its way into this realm. One morning in this realm, all the poets, playwrights, and composers woke to find their notations disintegrating on their desks, just as all the artists beheld their fresh colors melting together and their sculptures in progress imploding. The allotted amount of negative space in art had been used up, so nothing new could be created. The actors and the musicians didn't mind. There were already more than enough works to keep them employed, and their audiences were palpably relieved to glimpse, for the first time, the possibility of, if not actually catching up, at least not completely going under, as they felt they had been doing all their entire adult lives. No, the only ones who actually suffered were the creators themselves, who now rendered otherwise cheerful citizens gloomy by their very presence, even when they weren't complaining about their situation, which was hardly ever the case. The formation of grief groups and psychotherapy SWAT teams did nothing to alleviate their misery. After some debate, the artists were rounded up, herded onto luxury cruise ships, and sent on tours of the realm's islands in hopes that new vistas might cheer them. But when they returned, they were even more unpleasant than they had been before their departure, and the rest of the populace, having grown used to their absence, was less willing than ever to tolerate them. The only alternatives seemed to be internment or mass execution. So back to the ships they were sent, but this time the crews refused to accompany them, and now they must swab the decks themselves and do their own cooking. At designated ports, they are provided with supplies and then sent on their way without being allowed to disembark. It is as though all the human restlessness of the entire realm now repines on these ocean liners, while everyone else gets along quite well without it. You all know what negative space is, right? Okay. When vacations to the past became available in this realm, citizens in their second and third decades of life rushed to view history's dramas. But those in their more mature years chose instead to visit their parents' younger selves in hopes of extricating them from their varied and mutating configurations of difficulty. No one knows whether or not such attempts were successful, since none of the adult offspring ever reappeared in their own chronological locations. Some people speculated that this tinkering with history had predictably created alternate time streams in which the travelers elected to remain as in some sense the guardian angels of their youthful mothers and fathers, from whom they were unable to tear themselves away. Others posited that the rescuers had altered so many past events and circumstances that they had paradoxically, and no less predictably, erased the occasions of their own conceptions. But despite all this public safety announcements, beware, contact with your parents' childhoods may prove fatal to you. People continue to disappear on rescue missions to the past. That is why you can rarely find in this realm any citizen older than 45 or so, a demographic calamity that has come to seem completely commonplace. In this realm, it's everyone's task to maintain each other's visibility by granting the recommended daily amount of privacy, since people begin to disappear in bits and pieces when they are deprived of sufficient time alone. Newborns are, of course, 100% visible, having been cloistered within protective uterine walls throughout gestation. But social workers patrol the streets, keeping an eye out for any child with a translucent elbow, transparent ear, or missing hand. In many cases, a portion of the lost or vanishing body part can be restored by solitude, therapeutically administered in foster care. But sometimes, sadly, it is too late and the individual remains stuck in some stage of invisibility for the rest of his or her life. By law, every public venue reserves seats for the full invisibles, who, as a mark of minority pride, eschew the clothing that would establish for others their locations in space. Have you ever felt that life is just too much, or that it's not enough? This is a realm where this issue is dealt with. One day, historians announced their discovery that at some point far back in this realm's history, a great dilution had occurred, perhaps gradually, perhaps all at once, causing everything to diminish in vividness and intensity by precisely 25%. Even ordinary water, famous for tasting like nothing at all, was now apparently releasing only 77% of the flavor of nothing. Was it reality itself that had changed, or merely the people's ability to perceive it? Or was there in fact any distinction between these two possibilities? No one had any idea, and when the initial flurry of reactions to the news had subsided, most people went along just as they had before. After all, the event in question had taken place a very long time ago, so what did it really have to do with them? Some of the populace were relieved, however. These individuals had always suspected that something was missing and had engaged in various kinds of frenzied entertainments and exertions in order to compensate. Now they found themselves free to enjoy a 77% satisfying breath of reprieve. Others were appalled. To them, even ordinary experience had already seemed quite excessive. So the phantom 23% constituted nothing but threat. If it had inexplicably gone away, it would just as inexplicably return. Now they would have to struggle against not only the 77% that had been exhausting them, but their own fear that the very next moment might bring about the bursting forth of the rest. What did the people of these two groups have in common? Each had privately assumed that he or she was the only one who felt either the deficiency or the excess of existence, and had thus attributed the sensation to some personal flaw. That is how a new verb phrase came into being, which may be translated as something along the lines of to feel at once both a little less isolated and a little less unique. Okay, one more realm. Okay, in this realm, citizens remain veiled at all times. Infants' faces are covered immediately after birth, so that everyone grows up perceiving the world through a fine silk mesh. Of course, things weren't always this way. According to the national myth, everyone went around barefaced until one night at the winter feast, a bard sang a poignant ballad about two lovers who exchanged their lonelinesses by gazing into each other's eyes. The bard's tale had been metaphorical, not literal. But since in this population, as in most others, literal thinkers outnumber metaphorical thinkers by at least 500 to 1, all kinds of people immediately engaged in the same exchange. They traded their lonelinesses, some with the ones they most cherished and others with the nearest individuals at hand. And it didn't stop there, because each person found a new loneliness so unbearably alien and excruciatingly familiar. Everyone rushed to seek relief through another exchange, and then another and another in a web of bewildering transpositions. Ironically, each soul longed for his or her original loneliness, as if for a vanished beloved, and thus art and the alphabet sprang into existence prematurely and under great pressure in this realm, as citizens strove to depict the densities, textures, and so on of their original lonelinesses. Very occasionally, a loneliness would be restored to its birth host, but after the extended trauma of separation, the fit never felt quite right. Even more rarely, a loneliness would inexplicably reject a host, or vice versa. Those disembodied lonelinesses wandered throughout the realm, seeking some altruist to take them in, though the highest number of lonelinesses anyone survived having at the same time was, purportedly, 3. To restore order, the people agreed to don veils. And eventually, of course, everyone who had participated in these exchanges passed away, replaced by a generation that knew about them only secondhand. Now, centuries later, tourists are drawn to this realm, imagining that any society so obsessed with veils must be exotic. but they almost always leave long before their visas have expired, repelled by the culture of personal distance.